Good morning, and welcome to the All Souls Kansas City live stream worship gathering for Sunday, June 21st. As we serve the greater good by remaining physically apart during this time of contagion, we nevertheless come together in mind and spirit through the gifts of technology. Today, we honor the virtual presence of those who have formally joined our community in the past several months and welcome them into membership. We observed the celebration of Juneteenth last Friday and rejoice with formerly enslaved people everywhere in the promise of freedom, both real and yet to be made real. We noticed the longest day and the briefest night of the year yesterday, as the solstice brings the beginning of the summer season, and the days start to shorten now, little by little, until the next turning in December. Also today, we lift up the legacy of fatherhood and give thanks for those biological fathers, spiritual fathers, and father figures who have helped to shape our lives and bequeath to us the heritage of generations. The poet Antoine de Saint-Exupéry puts it this way: "In a house which becomes a home, one hands down and another takes up the heritage of mind and heart. Laughter and tears, musings and deeds. Love, like a carefully loaded ship, crosses the gulf between the generations. Let us bring up our children. It is not the place of some official to hand to them their heritage. If others impart to our children our knowledge and ideals, they will lose all of us that is wordless and full of wonder. Let us build memories in our children, lest they drag out joyless lives, lest they allow treasures to be lost because they have not been given the keys. We live not by things, but by the meanings of things. It is needful to transmit the passwords from generation to generation. The flame of our kindled chalice is one of those passwords from generation to generation. It carries the treasure of our faith in freedom, reason, justice, and compassion." May it be a key that we hand on to those in turn who come after us, hoping to build upon the foundation that we lay, the better world that we have dreamed of together. If you have a chalice or a candle with you, you might wish to join me and now light that flame where you are. I invite you to send a comment telling us where you are participating. Also, if you have a personal joy or concern that you would like to be shared later in the service, you can post that in the comments also, up until the close of the offering. We will pause now for a moment to watch where else the chalice is lit.
trust and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Hi everyone, welcome to All Souls Spring 2020 Induction Ceremony or Graduation, whichever. I would like to introduce our new inductees into our congregation. First up is Courtney Young and Stephen Flannery. The young Flannerys, Courtney, Stephen, and their 5-year-old daughter, Cozy, who was unable to join us today, are new to UU, but immediately felt connected and inspired when they first attended All Souls in January. As a family, they are actively committed to anti-racism, ancestral healing, and animism. They enjoy gardening, hiking, and playing with their cats, Clementine and Percy. Welcome. Pam Roberts. Pam has been attending All Souls this past year and would like to become a member because the congregation is very open, friendly, and accepting. She has already made many new friends from the church through a coffee group that she and her husband participated in last year. Welcome, Pam. Scott Hensey. After years, he finally decided to become a member of All Souls. Talk about deliberating his choices, making sure he's making the right one. He doesn't take things lightly. We are glad to have him, though. He enjoys the camaraderie of All Souls and all the friends he has made. Being part of the UU world has deepened his being and integrity for all who he encounters. Being Anthony Edwards' partner has its challenges. Well, he is an artist. But he would not be the caring human being he is without him. He enjoys cooking regional foods, his spoiled dogs, and traveling off the beaten path. Welcome, Scott. And finally, joining us today is Stacy Matthews. She came for the choir and stayed for the intelligent, warm, caring community. Welcome, Stacy. Those who could not make it are Ash Spears. Ash is a longtime UU. She is an activist, community organizer, and member of Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. Dana Downs. Dana is the new coordinator of community education for the City of Independence and hopes to make new friends at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. She wants to be a contributing member of the congregation. Liz McCamey. Liz is somewhat retired social worker, formerly of UUF Topeka. She is a writer, a book lover, grandma, and since March, an armchair activist. Sharon Zimmerman. Sharon had found All Souls about 2 years ago. Very warm welcome from everyone. She's glad to be here and where no one tells you what to believe in. She loves the community work this church is involved with and glad to call All Souls her home. And then myself, I am finally a member. I've been the membership coordinator here for 2 years and felt it time that I too should join this great church because it does follow the same values that I believe in. I am a photographer, photographic artist, and I run my own nonprofit organization. And I just want to say welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us. We will now read our new member covenant. This is now my religious community. It is composed of people both like me and different. Together we make it what it is. I want this community to be a source of light and wholeness. It will be if I am. It will make generous gifts if I am a generous giver. It will be a friendly and welcoming place if I remember to reach out. It will be a responsible steward of resources if I participate responsibly in it. It will share beauty and challenging thought with other people if I invite them. It will be a community of fearlessness and faith, of loyalty and love. If I, who make it what it is, am filled with these. As I become a member of this congregation, I dedicate myself to the task of becoming all the things I want my church to be. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning. My name is Russell Feldhausen. I am a member of this church and currently serve as the Vice President of the Board of Trustees. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our new members, as well as any visitors joining us today. I'm very glad you're here with us. Over the past few months, our church community has grown, learned, and adapted in order to stay connected and relevant during this pandemic. Our staff have adapted to different working situations and taken on new and important responsibilities. We've continued to offer regular worship services online, opportunities for fellowship and learning, and we were even able to celebrate both Rebecca's ordination and the 40th anniversary of Kendyl's ordination, all within the span of a single week. So, with some hard work and dedication, we're continuing to inspire personal and spiritual growth. At the same time, our community is actively involved in advocating for social and racial justice and change. The Hunger Outreach Team has been busier than ever, providing meals to those who need them in our community. Several members also helped form the UUKC Justice Action Group to discuss ways that we can effect great and positive changes in our local area. Please consider joining us for coffee and conversation after the service today to learn more about this important work. Through these actions, among many, many others, we are always working to build a respectful, caring community and creating a just and compassionate society. I ask you to consider this morning, how does All Souls help enrich you and your life? Is it the moving and insightful services, our exceptional religious education program, the beautiful music we enjoy each week, the opportunities we have for fellowship and community, or being part of a community that is advocating and supporting just causes? Let's take a few moments to reflect on how All Souls impacts our lives and our community. Unfortunately, the pandemic has also changed the facts about how our church is able to support itself. We were unable to have our annual auction, a major fundraiser for the church and an event many of us look forward to each year. There are fewer groups renting our spaces, leaving yet another gap in our income. While we've taken many steps to help save money where we can, the forecast is still grim for many months to come. The offering today will support the All Souls General Fund. I know many of us pledge regularly and generously to All Souls, but these additional offerings and gifts throughout the year help provide additional needed income to support our community and our mission. Today, I'm asking you to reflect upon the positive impact that this community has had on our lives, and celebrate that with a gift to support the work of this church. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Let's say together the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. Whether living or departed, whether awesome or troublesome, whether noticed for their presence or for their absence, fathers leave some sort of mark on all our lives. 5 of our All Souls members accept the invitation to reflect on the impact of their dads on this Father's Day.
To begin my tribute to my 89-year-old father, Jack Robertson, I'm jumping back to the early 1970s. I'm 10 or 11, riding in the back of our VW bus, looking out on the passing scenes of the east side of inner city Cleveland. This was our Sunday morning routine. Me and my 5 older siblings and younger sister with mom and dad in the front seats, riding from Cleveland's west side to the east side, because we had purposefully joined a church in the Black community of the segregated city. So there I am, absorbing again the scenery of the Black neighborhoods, and it's the 1970s. So I'm seeing flamboyant clothes, fabulous hair, and most striking to me, large cars, gilded and garish grills, hood ornaments, and stunning paint jobs. I remember asking aloud, why do they do that to their cars? And I remember my dad answering me from up in the front seat. An unfair economic system, housing policies, and realtor practices, he said, denied many people in this community the chance to own a home. For many, their cars were their most valuable possession and expression. Over the years, I've thought about how many other ways anyone might have answered my question. But this was my dad, a doctor in public health administration who had moved us to Cleveland to be its director of health and welfare because no one else in the administrative ranks was willing to take on that onerous job in a city that was deep in a Rust Belt crisis. He took us there after a career in the Indian Public Health Service that enriched my childhood with trips to powwows in Oklahoma, even living for a year on a southern Arizona Indian reservation. My dad's life of public service was grounded in the practice of living with and among the communities he served, truly knowing and understanding. Along the way, my parents put me into school with Native American children. I went to Sunday school with Black children. I saw direct service in underserved communities. Years later, I went into a career of social justice as a reporter and continuing on now with Link. Amy's and my two sons have thrived in the majority Black Center School District in South Kansas City. And I have been stunned by the recent accounts shared by my oldest son, who stood side by side with young friends, Black and white, unyielding and gasping in tear gas in the darkest, scariest moments of the Plaza Uprising, returning night after night for justice. A generational testament to my dad's life's work. I wasn't raised UU, but you can see how it makes sense I found All Souls. My dad has found it too, as a remote fan online from our family's home in Dallas, Texas. Thank you, Daddy. I love you.
Hey Dad, there's a lot you do for us, and I love you. But let's talk about food. You showed me tons of amazing food, including pasta, fluffin' earth sandwiches, tons of candy, kid pita coladas, Shirley Temples, nachos, and a lot more. Thank you, Dad. Love you. Happy Father's Day.
Recent events have brought my father's life and convictions to the fore. My father, Fred Westover, mined every experience for the truth and how he should honor it. As a humanist, he believed that every person should live as intelligently as possible. His appreciation for his teachers and his belief that people can change for the better led him to a career as a university professor at the University of Alabama. When George Wallace made his infamous stand in the schoolhouse door, my father was inside Foster Auditorium registering students, which led to Vivian Malone, a law student, being the first Black student to graduate from the university in 1965. My father was an advisor to the university president on how to accomplish integration. But my memory of my father's convictions go back to 1956, when Arthurine Lucy, a Black student, first attempted unsuccessfully to integrate the university. Campus unrest, stoked by town agitators, became a rioting mob. When the mob discovered Lucy was in class in Graves Hall, where my father officed, they stormed the front of the building. Looking out of his third-floor office window, my father saw two of his colleagues on either side of Arthurine Lucy, rushing her out a side door to a car and escape, the mob rounding the building, throwing rocks. Although a civil, law-abiding man, my father said of the mob, "I'm glad I didn't have a gun, because I would have shot the bastards." While a reasonable man, there were principles of basic right and wrong that, if violated, needed immediate confrontation and redress. I can only imagine my father's response to the video of George Floyd having the breath pressed out of him by a policeman, a modern-day lynching witnessed by the world. Certainly, he would have been part of the rising challenge to systemic racism now sweeping our country and the globe. He would find it incredible that it has taken another 70 years since his University of Alabama days for us to get at it.
Good morning. Jim Sajovic is my father. My dad partied in the 60s and divorced my mom when my brother was 6 months old, but he followed his art career to Kansas City and was a financially supportive long-distance father while I lived with my mother in San Francisco, sharing custody of us in the summers and at Christmas. Our situation in San Francisco with mom deteriorated over time, so dad fought for custody when I was 10 and became a full-time parent of 2 children as a result. Dad raised us as a single parent on an art professor's salary, balancing strict rules and a loving environment. When my mother passed away, Dad turned to All Souls. Although brought up Lutheran, Dad never spoke of or shared with us any religious direction. We lived only blocks from the Art Institute, and he knew All Souls as a liberal place he could take us for some closure. Reverend Vaughn held an office memorial service for us to say goodbye to Mom. I loved that he ended his readings with, "To everything there is a season," from the rock group The Byrds. Later I learned it was from Ecclesiastes. As a preteen, old for my years, we clashed on most things while I lived with my dad. I followed most of his rules and did well in school, but tested all his boundaries and was grounded often for misbehaving. Once I went to college, our relationship smoothed out, and we've had a consistent, mutually respectful father-daughter friendship throughout my adult life. Dad taught in the freshman program called Foundation at the Kansas City Art Institute for 43 years. He dabbled in other departments and with administrative duties, but his passion was opening up the world of art for the new students through exposure to different media, construction, and methods. Dad's career as a painter has taken him to Canada and Europe, showing and selling paintings in several countries. Most of his artwork has focused on images of human figure while incorporating poetry, politics, and challenging color palettes. In his most recent years, my father's work has been digital and has turned to the study of color fields and their optical and emotional effects on the viewer. My dad still parties. He still expresses high expectations for me and my brother, and he still exhibits love for us both. He lives only 20 minutes from me, and we see and talk to one another a couple times a week. I'm proud of what my dad accomplished with us in his career as an educator, and I appreciate his vision as an artist. I'm lucky to still have him in my life.
The dads I know are hardworking and kind individuals. Some are chill, stay-at-home dads, some are chill, hardworking dads, and some are even a cool, weird mix of both. My dad used to be the chill, hard-working type. Now he stays at home, helps around the house, and supports the family. And I could not be happier. My dad's biggest passion is disabled rights activism, which was his job for a while. My dad also does yoga, loves psychedelic folk and black metal music, and is also close to being a borderline hippie, which is a compliment. However, the thing I love most about my dad is that he has supported me in my passions since forever. We walk and talk a lot whenever we get the chance, and it is always a pleasure to have him there to support me and guide me through my life choices. The best dads are the ones that love, and I am glad that my dad loves me and I love him.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't gonna talk about my success. They're gonna talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror, and life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
Thank you to all those who shared your touching reflections about the many ways of being a dad. Let me begin with two more stories about fathers. The first will be familiar to those of you who have taken the adult religious education program on constructing a personal worldview. It is from author and theologian Sam Keen, who writes, "Once upon a time, when there were still Indians, gypsies, bears, and bad men in the woods of Tennessee where I played, and more important still, there was no death, a promise was made to me. One endless summer afternoon, my father sat in the eternal shade of a peach tree, carving on a seed he had picked up. With increasing excitement and covetousness, I watched while, using a skill common to all omnipotent creators, he fashioned a small monkey out of the seed. All of my vagrant wishes and desires disciplined themselves and came to focus on that peach seed monkey. If only I could have it, I would possess a treasure which could not be matched in the whole cosmopolitan town of Maryville. What status, what identity I would achieve by owning such a curio. Finally, I marshaled my nerve and asked if I might have the monkey when it was finished on the 6th day of creation. My father replied, 'This one is for your mother, but I will carve you one someday.' Days passed, and then weeks, and finally years, and the someday on which I was to receive the monkey did not arrive. In truth, I forgot all about the peach seed monkey. Life in the ambiance of my father was exciting, secure, and colorful. He did all those things for his children that a father can do, not the least of which was merely delighting in their existence. One of the lasting tokens I retain of the measure of his dignity and courage was the manner in which, with emphysema sapping his energy and eroding his future, he continued to wonder, to struggle, and to grow. In the pure air and dry heat of an Arizona afternoon, on the summer before the death of God, my father and I sat under a juniper tree. I listened as he wrestled with the task of taking the measure of his success and failure in life. There came a moment of silence that cried out for testimony. Suddenly I remembered the peach seed monkey, and I heard the right words coming from myself to fill the silence. In all that is important, you have never failed me. With one exception, you kept all the promises you made to me. You never carved me that peach seed monkey. Not long after this conversation, I received a small package in the mail. In it was a peach seed monkey and a note which said, "Here is the monkey I promised you. You will notice that I broke one leg and had to repair it with glue. I am sorry I didn't have time to carve a perfect one." 2 weeks later, my father died. He died only at the end of his life. The second story is a set of extracts from conversations that reporter Frank Schultz recently had with a roundtable of Black dads. He reports, "All fathers share advice. Many offer it as their children begin to drive, or when they leave home for the first time, and tell how to handle encounters with the police. But African American fathers' words for their children include some different cautions, and they often say those words when their kids are younger. Some call it the talk. My son at age 11 knows to stick his hands up to the ceiling of the car and keep them there," Darrell Lewis said, because of his worry about encountering a white officer who would shoot if given the opportunity. "He asked me, 'Why are we having this talk?' He said, 'My white friends and their parents never have this talk.' I said, 'It's imperative we have this talk, because I want you to remain in the land of the living. My son should be able to bury me one day. I shouldn't have to be burying him. At the end of the day, I want them to come home. I do not want to get the call to come to the morgue and identify a body," said Kenny Yarborough. "I don't think people understand that a simple traffic stop can lead to a funeral. Every time there's a murder, a shooting, I have to revisit that because I raised millennials," Yarborough added. "They're more prone to advocate. They're more prone to fight back. They have fire, they have drive, they have passion, and when they see an injustice, they want to argue it immediately." "I don't care what happens, don't talk till we get there," advises Sean Levy. "What kids need to understand is that as a parent, you're their advocate, even when kids feel, and are accurate, that they are being mistreated. The hard thing as a parent with children at that age is it robs them of their innocence," Levy said. "And you as a parent, you think of their vulnerability, that you are not able to protect them, and the world does not see them as you see them. You have to make them aware of that." At some level, it is preposterous for a childless white woman to be reflecting on Black fatherhood. And yet, I think we have to take the risk of imagining ourselves in one another's shoes if we are ever to secure the web of compassion and understanding in a way that will allow actual justice to flourish in society and individuals to thrive and become whole. Promises and warnings, hopes and threats. These are the measure of our love for those who will inherit the world from our hands, whether biological children, children we raise, students or mentees, or whatever kinds of successors we may have in our lives. The reality is that no individual arrives in this world as a blank slate. Rather, we are born into ever-shifting sets of family systems, parental ambitions and fears, and social locations, classes, nationalities, races. All these shape our identities and form part of the legacies that we have inherited and will in turn pass on to our own next generation. In a certain way, Sam Keen's story of the peach seed monkey is a tale of quintessential privilege. I hope you can hear that. There is even an echo of classic racism in his parallel of Indians, gypsies, bears, and bad men in the woods where he played. The implied assumption that these are all exotic, slightly sinister characters out in the forest, while the safe, normal people, like him, like his father, like God, are all by default white. The legacy that Sam's father has to offer him is not survival commandments in a hostile world, but the assurance that promise making and promise keeping are a fundamental aspect of human integrity and community. That is an enduring lesson, as both those who learned it and those who learned its opposite can testify. The opportunity to raise a child in an environment that can focus on the development of reciprocal trust and responsibility as the basis of both personal character and a good society assumes that neither father nor son is faced with a cultural reality of arbitrary violence as a frequent, inescapable experience. And that is the whole point of the concept of privilege. It's often about what isn't there, taking up emotional space and energy, taking time away from the things we want our children to learn, getting in the way of the legacies we aspire to leave. To the extent that I understand the talk that parents of black children must engage with them, at shockingly early ages, since repeated studies demonstrate that children of color are perceived as older, less innocent, and less excusable for trouble by authorities than their white age peers, I hear in it a tragic double bind that I think is not visible to many white observers. If I'm hearing this correctly, it is something that would trouble me deeply as a moral educator, and I would be fascinated and grateful to know if this resonates for all those who have experienced the talk from either the parent or the child side. I know that one of the most unambiguous messages that we try to inculcate in our own UU religious education programming as part of the larger universe of liberal values is to encourage our children to stand up for what they believe in. Be the person who interrupts bullying, we tell our kids. Be the one who helps, who shows that you care. Be the one who exposes corrupt authority, who speaks truth to power, who insists on fairness for everybody. Even if it's risky, we say, even if it might get you in trouble, we will have your back, we say. What we don't say is, this is your privilege as a white person. Yet when a black father speaks of how his son needs to comport himself in an encounter with police in America today, he has to dial back that crucial affirmation of his child's moral autonomy. Say yes, sir, and no, sir. Be polite, be compliant. Don't say anything. Do what they say, even if you know it isn't right. Complain about it later. Why? Because that is the most likely way to emerge from the exchange alive. It's not a guarantee, as we know from a long list of names, but it's the best way to increase the odds. Because, as Kenny Yarborough says, I do not want to get the call to come to the morgue and identify a body. Or as Darrell Lewis puts it, because I want you to remain in the land of the living. I don't want to be burying you. In other words, temper your conscience, your intuitive awareness of fairness, with the prospect of my unendurable parental grief if the violence of this culture kills you. Sacrifice your millennial fire, your drive, your passionate argument with injustice. so that I don't have to mourn your life snuffed out by a twitchy cop. And I say to you, my white friends, if you are not making that heartbreaking, soul-rending plea to the young lives that look to you for ethical guidance, then you are living in a legacy of privilege. What are we to do then? It makes no sense to stop teaching white children the capacity for covenant mutuality that is the basis of any decent social contract, or to retreat from urging the heirs of privilege to live out their demand for justice. That is a legacy we need to pass along if there is to be any hope for a more equal future. But how about teaching them not to be colorblind, but rather aware of the ways in which things have long been and still are different for those who are black? How about teaching them the history of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, not as something long ago and far away and over, but as the through line that shapes so many of our institutions and neighborhoods today? How about teaching them the achievements and cultures and complex histories of black communities, both here in the United States and globally? How about teaching them to hold politicians and judges and police accountable to standards of law and decency and human dignity? Or how about this? How about we get busy, you and I, and dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline that runs right through the local precinct station and the for-profit prison industry, so that the legacy we are leaving our children, both black and white and all other colors, is just a little less poisoned than the one we received? So that the talks that fathers have with white kids and that fathers have with black kids might be a little less urgently and painfully different. Many of us remember the values that our fathers taught us as the most important thing we retain from them throughout our lives, even after we have in the course of nature buried them at the end of their days. For some of us, perhaps dads informed our growth more by their counterexample of the kind of person not to be. For others, it may be an enduring absence we struggle to fill while we invent the wisdom of parenting on our own. Others of us may still be enjoying years of comfort with our father's enduring presence and supportive love, or perhaps struggling with an as yet unresolved relationship. But no matter what inheritance we received, whether difficult or treasured or complicated, we are all confronted by the question of what legacy we hope to leave behind when we ourselves, in turn, are gone. Those legacies are both individual and collective, the unique bequest that each of us can make of our own gifts and learnings, but also the joint heritage of a shared society and a common good. We can stop making heroes out of oppressors, surely, and take their statues away from the public square. That's a place to start. But what is our intention about the values we are going to offer in their stead? How can we begin to come together as a culture around assuring that all our children don't have to worry about dying of racism and can focus on the growth of wisdom and character as they step out into the world? That ought to be the concern foremost in every father's mind, not how to keep their kids safe from the unpredictable, potentially fatal arm of the law. There's an old Appalachian folk hymn which offers the image of departed fathers and mothers as stars in the dawn sky, safe in the community of heaven, but looking down to watch over their children still, and the comfort that we might take in that presence. Our fathers, whether living or dead, it suggests. Continue to pray for us, to be the guardians of our spirits, just as today's fathers will one day shine in the memories of their children. If they shall have cause to think with gratitude of their father's struggle to leave for this world a legacy of freedom, equality, and justice, then perhaps we shall find that day is indeed a breaking in our souls. Will you join me in song? Our community's commitment to human fellowship has always called us to share in one another's celebrations and to weep together with those who mourn. This means that we sometimes set aside a few moments in our gatherings to tell about the joys and concerns that are shaping our lives. As we have learned new ways to be connected across the distances of safety, we continue to share our journeys in this way. Our beginning joy is always to welcome those who may have joined us for the first time today, and that includes Carol C. in Baltimore from a distance. Oh, and Russ and Miriam are joining us from San Antonio, and Ruth Robertson and Bill Sewell are in Houghton, Michigan on Lake Superior. It is, of course, a great joy to welcome our new members today. We're delighted that you've chosen to be part of our community. Other joys and concerns include these. Chuck has a concern that we deeply regret the passing of John Gingrich and Linda Jones. Our heartfelt sympathies to their families. And Chuck also has a joy, which is to thank Ellie for the additional plants she's contributed to our gardens. Thank you, Ellie. Scott has a concern, which is a sorrow at learning of the death of Linda Jones, mother to Morgan and Teddy Sanchez Jones. Tori has a joy. She wishes to thank the many All Souls members who sent cards and good wishes for her future at her graduation. Andrea and Tori have a shared joy. In the midst of mourning the death of their mother and grandmother, they also appreciated the cards from so many of their friends at All Souls. Marion has a joy, which is that he is now officially retired. Congratulations, Marion. Dory has a joy, which is that she has rested for 2 days with sore muscles from working on her deck, which is much improved, and that her 40-year-old belt sander still works. Ellie has a joy, which is that although they were separated because he's confined for medical reasons, they celebrated their 61st wedding anniversary. Congratulations, you guys. Mazel tov. Jill shares that Chris had knee replacement surgery on Friday, and it all went well, and she's bringing him home this afternoon. So she welcomes your prayers and good wishes for a speedy and non-eventful recovery. Beth has a joy that the Black Lives Matter movement and the demonstrations against police brutality and the conversations about systemic racism are gaining rather than losing momentum. And Richard shares a joy that he has a second job interview with connections to success, and the first interview went really, really well. Congratulations, Richard. In addition to these, we recognize the many joys and sorrows, outreachings of the Spirit that abide unspoken in all our hearts. And so I invite you now to join me in speaking the words of response adapted from the writings of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. We live not by things, but by the meanings of things. Love, like a carefully loaded ship, crosses the gulf between the generations. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world will cry, and you may rejoice. Now we extinguish these flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, however distant, or the fire of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts, until the time shall come when we are together again. Let's join in a closing song. Thank you for being part of our online worship today. We invite you now to take part in our virtual social hour by following the directions on screen or connecting through our webpage. Once there, you will be able to choose to participate in a discussion with members of the All Souls Justice Action Group about our congregational responses to the recent national protests and demands for accountability. I hope you will be with us next week when we will join Unitarian Universalists from all over the country and the world for shared worship with our online National General Assembly. This service, with its fabulous music and preaching, often goes a bit longer than an hour, but it will still be followed by our own All Souls online social time. It would be lovely to see you there. Meanwhile, everyone, please stay safe and be well this week.